What's going on, guys? You are tuned in to the Hot List. I'm your host, Matt Johnson with Keller Realty, and I come to y'all Monday through Friday at 12 o'clock Central Standard Time. We hang out and we talk about some real estate topics and questions. I answer a question of the day that is submitted by a listener of the podcast. And if you have a question about real estate, you're not sure where to start, I would be happy to be the real estate resource that you reach out to and think of to get your question answered. All you have to do is shoot me your question either here through Facebook, YouTube, or the podcast player that you are listening to this on. Uh, I would be happy to not only answer that question for you, use it for future videos and future content just like this one, because the chance that you have that question and somebody else has that question is extremely high. And what better way for me to be able to give back than to do episodes like this, continue to answer questions that people submit, and help them kind of springboard into more in-depth questions to get specific answers. Now, on the hot list, I typically don't go very in depth with a lot of these because every situation is a little bit different. We just kind of scratch the surface. And like I said, this helps people springboard into the right direction for a deeper dive on what they need. So, the question of the day, I get this from a lot of buyers that I'm working with right now. So, the question is, how can I make a more appealing offer? I will give you a spoiler alert right off the bat. This has nothing to do with declining inspections. That is absolutely not the route that I would recommend going. I have never recommended that to any buyers that I worked with. My opinion, that is just not something that I would advise my clients to do. Um, Other agents may do that. That is not something I'm comfortable with and would ever recommend. And we all know over the last year and a half, 2 years, house prices continue to rise. Inventory, for the most part, remains low depending on where you're at. And the demand for housing is still pretty intense with no really relief in sight in the near future. So it can be a challenging time to be a homeowner. However, you can still find a house that you're going to love. I've been doing it over the last 2 years with people. It may just take a little extra effort on your part as you proceed through your home buying adventure. Now, I will also say that we're going to be talking more on the loan side of things. While cash is still very much king, uh, there are ways to be more competitive and put your best foot forward with offers, even with a loan, versus just competing or offering with cash. So, to answer the question of the day, how can I make my offer more appealing? We're going to talk about 3 tips for buyers to secure a home. Again, this will not have anything to do with declining inspections. So if that's what you're told or that's what you're thinking, you absolutely need to stay tuned because we're not going to cover that as even an option. First one is going to be the pre-approval letter. I'm going to continue to beat this dead horse until buyers and other people start to listen. Uh, One thing to think about for or to be pre-approved for a loan, um, you know, you've got to get pre-approved. You got to do the steps, show that you are a true and serious buyer in order to be taken seriously in the market right now. Because today's market is absolutely competitive, and sellers don't want to wonder if a buyer is actually pre-approved. They want to know 100% that the buyer is pre-approved, and by accepting that offer and removing it from the market, they want to know that the contract that they signed with that buyer is going to be able to close and going to go to the closing table. Now, houses for sale get their most attention within the first 14 days on market, especially right now. By removing it and not knowing it could close is a gamble for sellers. I mean, that's just something buyers, whether you're a first time buyer or a seasoned buyer, that's just something that sellers are going to have to go through. And you, as a seller, are going to go through that at some point as well. Uh, because that's just how it is. So by going to a lender and making it as far as you possibly can with the loan process without a house, I mean, obviously you can only go so far till you find a house. This is going to give the seller confidence that they won't be in a position a month from now putting their house back on the market because the offer they accepted has fallen through. So, do your due diligence this and just get this done, because by making an offer and you're not pre-approved, this could mean a delay on their own purchase, on the seller's own purchase for their next house, or maybe they lose that house because the contract fell through. And not just do the sellers start to lose a little confidence, but buyers tend to get nervous on houses that were previously under contract, didn't close, and now back on the market. And it's whether it's at the fault of the buyer for backing out, seller for not willing to negotiate, whatever the case may be, this is kind of a red flag for buyers that see this house that is back on the market now. Number 2 tip on the list today: go conventional. While many buyers can typically get into a home quicker with a FHA loan, whether it's especially because of lower credit score, lower down payment requirements, sometimes sellers also know FHA loans, as well as other types of loans, do carry some additional requirements for the house itself. Typically, these items are already going to be done or could be, checked off because the house is more than likely occupied. So a lot of those are going to be checked off. But sellers still hear horror stories and, don't really want to deal with the unknown. Just because whether it's FHA, VA, USDA, those are all going to have additional stipulations and requirements that a conventional loan won't necessarily have. So in order to do this, I would recommend working on your credit score and choose a conventional loan rather than the FHA route. Conventional loans have fewer requirements on the property, like I mentioned, but don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with a FHA loan. Um, you can absolutely do this. I've helped a number of buyers over the last 2 years with FHA loans, and it's just a process that is going to require time and patience while going through house hunting, because the chance that you are going to get beat by a conventional loan is a possibility. So it's just something that you got to be prepared for and keep in mind. And finally, tip number 3, bring your best offer. When it comes to making an offer, offer your best. Notice I didn't say the highest offer. While the highest offer may be your best, there can be some other factors in there that could help this out if it's not the highest offer. Could be, closing time, offer to pay closing costs for the seller, as well as have an agent that finds out what is important to the seller. Because I've asked that question multiple times to listing agents, what's important to the seller? And some of them have told me, it's the highest price they can get, um, which I absolutely understand. Sometimes I've heard, you know, that they want to close quickly. They want to leave some of the items. They would like to have some of their closing costs paid. That is absolutely a possibility. So find that out, because the highest offer doesn't always win and doesn't get accepted. What I typically tell my buyers is offer as much as you're comfortable offering and whatever you're willing to lose, because you may not get a second chance in a competitive market like this. It's better to come out swinging than make, an average offer or a lowball offer and not get a second chance. With it being a seller's market right now, you're more likely going to be competing with several offers at once. And it's not going to be the same as buyers markets are, like they have been before, and I'm sure will be in at some point again. Where a buyer's market, the buyers have their pick of the homes and potentially offer a lower price than the seller is willing to take in order to get the deal, because there's an abundance of inventory. No matter what type of offer that you're going to make, there's going to be three things that will happen. They will either accept the offer, reject the offer, or counter and start to negotiate. Now, I mentioned before that I don't recommend to buyers to decline any inspections and just take it as is. So I absolutely do recommend doing some type of inspection, whether it's individual contractors, a whole house inspection, and negotiating repairs. I also recommend doing that, keeping your repairs request short instead of, page after page, especially if it falls into three different categories: health, safety, or structural. Obviously, if it falls under one of those three, those are going to be major repairs, major negotiations, and need to be done or repaired. The longer the list that you have, the less likely it is the seller is going to be willing to negotiate or even work with you. So keep in mind, no home is going to be 100%. What I talk about with buyers when we look at houses and make offers, because no house is going to be 100%, I tell them 80% of the house is going to check your boxes. So many bedrooms, so many bathrooms, whether it has a basement, an attached garage, however that looks, 80% are going to of those boxes are going to be checked. 10% are going to be repairs that you're willing to negotiate. Like obviously holes in a wall, some type of wood rot, something like that. And then the final 10% are going to be those items that you're going to be able to live with, like your current paint color, because paint is one of the easiest things that you can change. Yes, it's going to take some time and a little bit of money, but putting in a little effort on something. So if the walls, maybe the walls are blue and you want like a gray or beige, if it checks 80% of those boxes, excuse me, if it checks 80% of those boxes, it's still worth putting in an offer and just doing that after you close. So that's it. Those are the top 3 tips for buyers to secure a home right now. Again, number one was the pre-approval letter. If you are willing to get pre-approved and go as far as you possibly can through the loan process before finding a house, this is going to show sellers that you are truly interested and a serious buyer in the house and wanting to make it to the closing table. Number two, go conventional. While there's nothing wrong with a FHA or a VA loan, if you're able to get work on your credit score to get that a little bit higher, and with conventional loans, the they're not necessarily the 20% down like they used to be. Some of them I've seen at 3%, 5%, and 10%, depending on the lender. So if you're able to get the same money, same down payment as a FHA, work on your credit score, get that up a little bit, because the FHA loans do have additional requirements as well as inspections. And if you're able to go change it from FHA to conventional, you'll be able to compete in the market right now. And finally, tip number 3, bring your best offer. Again, I'm not going to say your highest offer. While it may be your highest offer, there are other ways to make your offer stand out. Not waiving inspections. I didn't talk about waiving inspections at all, other than that's something I don't recommend and that I always advise my buyers to do inspections. So your best offer, while it may be your highest, but it also could be a quicker closing time. It could be, you know, allowing a rent back for the sellers so that they have time to find a house. Maybe it is paying some part of the seller's closing costs on top of your own. Whatever that looks like, just know that you may not get a second chance. So come out swinging and offer as much as you're comfortable with and willing to lose, because this is not the time to try to save a little money and lowball a seller. Again, you may not get that second chance. So that's it. Those are the top 3 tips for buyers to secure a home. I greatly appreciate everybody for listening. Make sure that you keep those questions coming. Thank you to everybody that submits these questions or asks me these questions. I greatly appreciate it. I'm not able to do this without those questions, so make sure you keep them coming. I've also included links in the description so you can catch up on previous episodes of the Hot List. That is going to wrap it up for me. I've got a meeting to get to. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, I'm your host, Matt Johnson with Keller Williams Realty. I do this because your experience matters and should be trusted with a veteran. Y'all have a phenomenal day. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.